Welcome to Design Sandoval. I'm Michael Kurash and today we are in Dublin, Ireland. We would like to explore the city, its cultural heritage and some of its magnificent architecture. But before we do that, a fact is just about a quarter of the Ireland's population lives in Dublin and just about half of the whole population lives in the greater Dublin area. That's a lot of people. Let's explore the city. Please join us. The earliest reference to Dublin is sometimes said to be found in the writings of Ptolemy, the Egyptian Greek astronomer and cartographer around the year 140, who refers to a settlement called Iblana. Beginning in the 9th and 10th centuries, there were two settlements where the modern city stands. The Viking settlement of about 841 was known as Difflin, from the Irish Dublin or Black Pool, referring to a dark tidal pool where the river Puddle entered the Liffey on the site of the castle gardens at the rear of Dublin Castle, and a Gaelic settlement, Ath Cliath or Fort of Hurdles, which was further upriver at the present-day Father Matthew Bridge at the bottom of Church Street. Viking rule of Dublin would end completely in 1171 when the city was captured by King Dermot MacMurrough of Leinster, and Dublin became the centre of English power in Ireland after the Norman invasion of the southern half of Ireland. On 15 May 1192, Dublin's first written Charter of Liberties was granted by John, Lord of Ireland, and was addressed to all his French, English, Irish and Welsh subjects and friends. On 15 June 1229, his son Henry granted the citizens the right to elect a mayor. County Dublin was the first county in Ireland to be shired in the 1190s, and the city became the capital of English Lordship of Ireland. Dublin was peopled extensively with settlers from England and Wales, and the rural area around the city. In the 14th century, this area was fortified against the increasingly assertive native Irish, becoming known as the Pale. In Dublin itself, English rule was centred on Dublin Castle. The city was also the main seat of the Parliament of Ireland from 1297. Which was composed of landowners and merchants. Important buildings that date from this time include St. Patrick's Cathedral, Christ Church Cathedral, and St. Audian's Church, all of which are within a kilometre of each other. Throughout the Middle Ages, the city paid protection money or black rent to the neighbouring Irish clans to avoid their predatory raids. In 1315, the Scottish army under Edward the Bruce burned the city's suburbs. As English interest in maintaining their Irish colony waned, the defence of Dublin from the surrounding Irish was left to the Fitzgerald Earls of Kildare. Dublin and its inhabitants were transformed by the upheavals of the 16th and 17th centuries in Ireland. This era saw the English conquest of the whole island under the Tudor dynasty. While the old English community of Dublin were satisfied with the conquest and disarmament of the native Irish, they were deeply alienated by the Protestant Reformation that had taken place in England, being almost all Roman Catholics. In 1592, Queen Elizabeth I opened Trinity College Dublin, located at that time outside the city on its eastern side as a Protestant university for the Irish gentry. However, the important Dublin families spurned it and sent their sons instead to Catholic universities on continental Europe. We will be back after a short commercial break. Stay tuned. There is an amazing artifact in this college worth seeing. Let's explore this. The library of Trinity College is one of the most famous book depositories in the world. It contains the Book of Kells, an illuminated manuscript gospel book in Latin, containing the 4 Gospels of the New Testament together with various prefatory texts and tables. It is believed to have been created around 880. The text of the Gospels is largely drawn from the Vulgate, although it also includes several passages drawn from the earlier versions of the Bible known as the Vetus Latina. It is regarded as a masterwork of Western calligraphy and the pinnacle of insular illumination. The manuscript takes its name from the Abbey of Kells, County Meath, which was its home for centuries. Protestants became a majority in Dublin in the 1640s, when thousands of them fled there to escape the Irish Rebellion of 1641. When the city subsequently threatened by Irish Catholic forces, the Catholic Dubliners were expelled from the city by its English garrison. In 1640s, the city was besieged twice during the Irish Confederate Wars, in 1646 and 1649. However, on both occasions, the attackers were driven off before a lengthy siege could develop. By the end of the 17th century, Dublin was the capital of English-run Kingdom of Ireland, ruled by the Protestant New English minority. Dublin was the only part of Ireland in 1700 where Protestants were a majority. In the next century, it became larger, more peaceful, and prosperous than at any time in its previous history. By 1700, the population had surpassed 60,000, making it the second largest city in British Empire, only surpassed by London. During this era, the city was modernized with homes mandated to face towards the River Liffey. At the beginning of the 18th century, Dublin was a medieval city akin to Paris. Many of the city's notable Georgian buildings and streetscapes were built during this time. In the course of the 18th century, as Paris would in the 19th century, it underwent a major rebuilding, with the wide streets commissioned demolishing many of the narrow medieval streets and replacing them with large Georgian streets. Until 1800, the city housed the Parliament of Ireland. By the late 18th century, the ascendancy class of Irish Protestants, who were mostly descendants of British settlers, came to regard Ireland as their native country. Inspired by the American and French revolutions, the United Irishmen planned to take Dublin in a street rising in 1798. But their leaders were arrested and the city occupied by a large British military presence shortly before the rebels could assemble. Shocked by this attempt at independence, the Crown moved forward with the formation of Great Britain, stripped Dublin of its status as Irish capital, and closed the Irish Parliament. Although the city's growth continued, it suffered financially at its loss of status within the British Empire. Many of the city's once elegant Georgian neighborhoods rapidly became slums. Irish nationalists gained control of Dublin's government with the reform of local government in 1840, and Daniel O'Donnell became the first Catholic mayor in 150 years. Increasing wealth promoted many of Dublin's Protestant and Unionist middle classes to move out of the city proper to new suburbs, which are still distinguished by their graceful Victorian architecture. A new railway also connected Dublin with the middle-class suburbs in 1821. Industries such as Guinness Brewery and Jameson Distillery provided the most stable employment in the city. In 1900, Queen Victoria visited Dublin on what became her last major trip before her passing. At this time, the population was over 400,000. While the city grew, so did its level of poverty. This was well documented by writers of the day, such as James Joyce. The first 30 years of the 20th century saw the Irish Civil War and wars of independence. Dublin was a major conflict site and saw repeated attacks and bombings. Many of the city's most beloved sites were destroyed and rebuilt at this time. The conflict was so brutal that by the time World War II started, Ireland remained completely neutral. The years after World War II saw Dublin grow into a thriving world capital. A movement to resign the city saw much of the Georgian architecture replaced by modern architecture. It wasn't until the 1980s that many in the city saw the need to preserve classical buildings. The past 30 years has seen Ireland's economy boom, with the era of prosperity coming to be known as a Celtic tiger. In the early 2000s, Dublin saw the largest economic expansion in Europe. Dublin quickly became one of the most modern cities in the world while maintaining its heritage. Today, it has a population of 2 million people and is considered a financial and cultural center of Europe and the world. I truly hope you enjoyed this view into Dublin, Ireland. It is a vibrant and lively city. I encourage you to visit it and submerge yourself into Irish life.